welcome everybody. I'll try not to stand right here and talk to the audience that's right there. So this is our annual tentative budget presentation and hearing. It is recorded so that members of the public who want to see it can see it afterwards, and it'll be on the website. Basically, the way we're organizing the presentation this year is a little bit different than last year. I'll start by going through a little bit of the background of the budget development process and its role from a philosophical standpoint and how we get to this place. And then I'll turn it over to Mrs. Lenhart to talk about dollars and cents, and then we'll go back to the full board for discussion of that. So as the board is well aware, the budget is a process, and it's important to recognize that the members of the Finance Committee put in a great deal of time to get to the place where there's a recommended budget for the full board consideration. So I did want to recognize Mr. Bellman as the chair, Mr. Bellish, Mr. Brzee, and Mrs. Zahn as the committee members, along with Mrs. Lenhart and myself, obviously, and talk a little bit about the process. So it takes almost 6 to 8 months to go through the budget process. It begins as soon as the school year starts in November. And so as you can see on the slides, we begin by asking our budget managers, generally our administrators, for their requests. That begins right before Teachers Convention in November, bringing us all the way to where we are today in March to adopt a tentative budget, which then becomes the final budget a few weeks later. So as you look across, I think it's sometimes hard to remember that this is such a long and drawn-out process. And this is important because it's the way we set our values of what we want to fund, because it's what we believe in for our community. And basically, as soon as the budget passes, we start the process over again and continue going. And it's also a good opportunity to remind ourselves of one of the slides that I shared when I first got here, which is how this ties together with the whole child approach. So one of the questions that was asked when the whole child approach was developed was about resource allocation. And if we make decisions about the resources with the child at the center, then we can start to think carefully about a whole child approach to education. So I bring that up because what I'm going to go through and the way we organize it this year are some highlights tied to each of the whole child tenets that were in the last couple of budgets and where that's taken us. So the first tenet is healthy, as we all know. Each student enters school healthy and learns about and practices a healthy lifestyle. And for example, phase 1 of the fitness center at the middle school, the prioritized time in the schedules for health and physical education. You know, it was only 2 years ago that we made a decision to expand elementary school phys ed, which required us to hire 2 additional staff members. That was a budget prioritization at that time. Water bottle fillers, and you know, I say this somewhat jokingly, the only real applause line when I talked to the whole staff on the first day of school this year was the water bottle fillers comment, which says something about me or the water bottle fillers. But basically, that was another place in the area of health that we were able to make sure that everybody had access to clean, filtered water at all times. In the area of safety, that the school environment is both physically and emotionally safe. We talk about things like school security, our staff and visitor management systems and identification systems. A couple of things here, the TPAS system, that's the left, that's our visitor system where people scan their driver's licenses. That's only in its second year of implementation. The top right, the vests that our staff members wear during security drills and even when on outside duties. And the bottom right, it's a little bit hard to see in that picture, is a pilot program at ALT this year so that when we have mass visitor events, we have a way to wristband visitors so that we have easy access. And I know some of you went through that as parents, and that will roll out to the other 4 schools next year as well. Emergency response preparedness, stop it here at the middle school. The picture on the left is from a recent threat assessment training where we brought our mental health professionals and administrators to a national level training sponsored by Sandy Hook Promise in recognizing threats and responding to them before they become actual school safety issues. We have things like go kits in our classrooms, which is a benefit of work done by a lot of people going back many years, but certainly our security compliance manager is very important in that, so that in each classroom we have access to emergency supplies, our nurses have access to a triage kit. These are things that 10, 20 years ago we would not have been thinking about as a budgetary priority in K-8 school districts, but they are. And these are the things that safety brings to us. Also though, it's the people. So remember, it was only a few months ago at this board meeting, we recognized a whole list of staff members. And we look at where budget allocations go, we know that salaries and benefits are by and large the biggest piece of the pie. And I think it's important to remember what that dollar goes to, that we don't just think about it as the 81% of the budget, but about the people who are behind that money. And if we invest in our staff, they are able to take care of our kids. The ongoing maintenance, for example, this project which was done at ALT last summer to replace the floors, things like security fencing that was done last summer around the district. These are just ongoing maintenance projects that live in the budget in the dollars and cents. Keeping the central school playground safe, reinforcing a wall at Mount Horeb School that needed a structural reinforcement again last summer. In the area of supported, each student has access to personalized learning, and that second part, even more important maybe, is supported by qualified caring adults. Our ability to recruit and retain the best staff possible. On the left side, that's from the summer bus tour when new staff members go and take a tour with our administrators. On the right side, that's the ALT faculty lounge in the middle of its kind of renovation, which was a budget priority at the end of last year that we made. Expanding our character education and social emotional programs in the area of supported. So we brought in several of the programs of Sandy Hook Promise, including Start With Hello, which is pictured here across the district. In the area of engagement, that students are actively engaged in learning and connected to the school and broader community. So recent priorities in this area for the board and the community are classroom design, community partnerships, including the addition or the reintroduction, I should say, of K through 6 field trips this year in the regular operating budget, and creativity through the arts. During the master schedule changes, the arts was a priority to make sure we protected that time and kids had the options there. And although this isn't a specific budget area for the board, I think it's important to recognize that our PTOs are incredibly important on the supported side. I think we all know that on a day-to-day basis, but a lot of money comes into our operations because of PTO support. Not only that, but our PTOs run our food service programs, as you know, and that's another area of support. Civic engagement, a couple different things here. On the right side is an interview that was taking place with Mr. Hartshorn here from the middle school during the 8th grade bus tour last year of local history sites that is now being replaced by 4th graders going to those historical sites this year. And then we have 2 different community service projects on the left side. We have a lot of that in our schools all the way from elementary through the middle school. And on the area of challenge, the 5th tenon area, each student is challenged academically and prepared for success in college or further study, and for employment and participation in a global environment. So under the general category of innovative practices, the kinds of things that our building principals can fund through their budgets, we breakout EDU, which the board experienced here, but is also happening at some of the elementary schools. On the right side of Mount Horeb, there was a kindergarten STEM challenge going on there with apples and toothpicks. We have over the last several years, we've expanded our preschool or integrated preschool program. TED EDU, which is a new 8th grade cycle elective at the middle school as part of the new master schedule. Just a couple of examples. And then one of our district goals this year has to do with the capstone experiences. Last year we piloted grade 5. This year that expands to grade 8 as well. So those are just some highlights of the kinds of things that we funded over the last couple of years through our regular operating budget that I think help us kind of live our motto of shining brighter every day. And briefly here, I'll highlight what that looks like in the current budget that's on the agenda tonight. I'm not going to go through every single thing that's in the budget, but just a couple of highlights in each category. So in the area of healthy, although it's not in our Fund 10 operating budget, it comes from capital reserves. We have the second phase of the fitness center. We have continuing support for health and PE. There are some new requirements coming out from the state in the area of that curriculum. Continuing to prioritize PE time and the staff that we added in those areas. We haven't talked about it in this audience, but at the Finance Committee, we know that we talked about the need to finally replace a sewer at Central School that has been a problem for many years. That's a health issue, not only for our students, but also for our staff to make sure that all of the restrooms are accessible when they need them. Continuing to replace bottle fillers as we go through our water fountain replacements. And another area that several years ago when we went to having some shared staff at the elementary level, one area we committed to not sharing was our school counselors, so that every school had a better than nationally recommended student to counselor ratio. In the area of safety, most of our referendum project work is really safety, so that the boiler and pump projects, roofs, windows, that kind of thing. But it's also our ongoing routine maintenance and making sure that we're staffed appropriately in those areas. As many of you are aware, our buildings and ground staff does a great deal of the work internally on their own, and we have to constantly make sure they have what they need to do that safely. In the area of engagement, continuing to fund our K-6 field trips, as we started to this year. And we also had a district goal last year about expanding after-school clubs and activities, and that's all maintained in the budget for next year. In the area of supported, just flip over my, one of the things that is still an outcome of the steep work that was done now 4 years ago was maintaining small neighborhood schools and small class sizes. That costs significant resources, and the 1920 budget maintains all of those things that we've come to kind of value as the Warren Township Schools experience. We are adding at the middle school in the budget for next year an autism program and a language and learning disabilities class. Those are based on the needs of sixth graders next year in next year's sixth grade class. Those are mandated programs. If we weren't able to build those programs ourselves, we would spend much more money to send those students to an out-of-district placement, which is both more expensive, but also less ideal for the students' development. In the area of supported, we also think about things like taking care of our salary and benefits commitments, and we know that the budget accounts for a projected 10.2% increase in health benefits, which is a significant share of the budget. And so even with declining enrollment, we have increases in fixed costs, even though there will be fewer staff members in the district next year than there are this year as reflected in the budget. And then finally, in the area of challenge, one of the items in the budget in front of you tonight is allocating funding for a long overdue renovation of the elementary school libraries. I do want to point out, and you saw it in the Finance Committee minutes, I think from the last meeting, that if that funding is approved in the budget, it doesn't mean the projects happen. It means that the money is there so that the board has the ability to make a decision, probably more like in May or June, on whether or not to proceed and at what scope to proceed. But the money is in the budget to allow that decision to be made. Necessary curriculum work, ongoing professional development, the capstone projects, and the replacement of student technology. And then finally, sustainable. So this is not a tenet we typically talk about for programs, but in budgets, a lot of what we talk about is about sustainability. How do we make sure that things we introduce are able to be there for the long term? So making sure we have the right amount of staff to meet the needs of our students without class sizes increasing, that sort of thing. That we are making, again, for the second year in a row, a dedicated capital reserves deposit of $100,000. Strategic planning is budgeted for so that we can fund the facilitator to do that work with us next year. Our transportation costs are allowed to go up a certain amount based on a state calculation, and once again, they're coming in below that amount thanks to the relationship with our local vendor. And that all the decisions made about what wound up in the tentative budget by Finance Committee members, full board discussions we've been having for the last couple of months, administrative work for the last 6 months, is about doing so with the whole child in mind and making sure our philosophy leads to a budget recommendation. And now I'll turn it over to Mrs. Lemmer. I could give you this too.
Okay, so now that Dr. Mingle has done an excellent job detailing the work of the district, both in already established programs and initiatives, how does the budget support all of these initiatives? Well, the first thing that our budget does is it makes sure that it retains an ability to realize any budget efficiencies which are possible. And Dr. Mingle did mention already that effective for the 18-19 year, we now share some staff between our schools as a response to our declining enrollment. We have efficient transportation routing. A couple of years ago, we eliminated 6 routes. We tier not only within our district, but we tier with the high school also. We have developed the special education programs in-house that meet the needs of our students at a more economic approach. We have, I think this kind of gets lost because it's been long-standing, but we have a very vigorous energy management program and monitoring its usage, and that results in real dollars that are still available in the budget. We use some state funds. About a year and a half ago, we took advantage of something called the direct install program, which is actually funded by everyone who's sitting in this room and pays an electric bill. And we were able to use some of that funding at, I believe it was a 30 or 40% split. There's the construction projects that we do in-house. Dr. Mingle mentioned that. So we buy the supplies and we have a very talented staff who's able to do it in-house. A specific note was when we did the new entrance door at ALT. It was assumed we were going to bring in a vendor for that, but we didn't. We did it in-house. And then, of course, the use of state funds through the passage of the referendum project, whereby we're going to get about 34% of funding from the state. However, there are always, so also in addition to that, we can increase in revenues, right? So we have some budget efficiencies, we can increase our revenues. About a year and a half ago, we switched our bank and we see significant increase in interest on our deposits. Our relationship, our contract with our before and after school provider, which was new in the 18-19 year, is the decision was made based on the value of the program, but it is financially also advantageous to the district. Due to the value of our preschool program, we see significant monies from parents paying tuition to attend. We receive monies due to the value of our program, special ed programs. We receive monies from other districts to send their students here. We are using what they call E-rate Category 2 funding in the 1920 year to help us with some of our technology equipment. And we provide some transportation services from some neighboring districts, Berkeley Heights, Watchung Hills, at a fee. And then, as we all know, last Thursday we received our state aid for 1920, and we did see a 10% increase, which equates to $153,000. We do all of this in light of the fact that state aid has never gone back to the levels that it was at before the big cut. Everybody sort of remembers the big cut. There was the before, and then there was the after. So we're still not back up there, although we are starting to definitely get back a little bit. Okay, so what does that mean with the tax levy? So we are allowed, in purest terms, a 2% general fund tax levy increase. So people say the budget can increase by 2%, but that's really a misnomer because the tax levy can increase by 2%. So your tax levy is about 90% of your budget. So really your budget can only increase by about 1.8. If everything else stays the same, if a 90% resource can grow 2%, you're really at a 1.8% growth. And you can see here that the district has really been quite low historically, given the past 6 years that are shown up there. So given that, when you don't spend to the extent of your allowable ability to raise taxes, then you bank the money. So, and you bank it for 3 years until it falls off. So if you look here, this shows a chart of the amount that the district taxed below its ability for 16, 17, 17, 18, and 18, 19. This proposed budget, the 1920 budget, will use about $211,000, basically about a third, of the bank cap from 16, 17. The other $447,000 will expire. And then the rest of it stays on the books because it's still not 3 years. Okay. The budget that the board will vote on tonight, or the budget that is presented to the board tonight, will actually never go into effect on July 1st of 2019. The budget that's presented is mitigated already coming out of the gate by a few different items. Number one, you carry over purchase orders from, in this case, the 18-19 year. So with them, though, comes the money. So the budget increases, but the tax levy does not increase. In addition, throughout the year, the board can approve projects, and that can bring over some capital reserve or maintenance reserve. And then lastly, there are 2 sets of funds from the state of New Jersey that we don't get our notices for our money till about the summer. One is extraordinary aid and the other is non-public transportation. So those are monies that, although they're based on prior year expenditures, the board can vote to allocate them to the following year's budget. So the number that gets voted on tonight, there will always be encumbrances. You'll never have a year that there's 0 encumbrances. So the number that the board votes on tonight will be mitigated by the time we get to July 1st, with no effect on the tax levy. So the budget, let's talk about the expenditures. I believe Dr. Mingle had mentioned already, salaries and benefits account for 81% of the general fund expenses. Now, it's a little bit of a misnomer because within what the state defines as benefits are some things that you may not consider as benefits. If you're an employee in a company, your employer pays the other half of your Social Security, right, if you're in the Medicaid. In the state of New Jersey, for certificated staff, the state pays the employer part. But for non-certificated staff, which are all our paraprofessionals and our bus drivers and our buildings and grounds department, that's included in the benefits, as is the requirement that we have to carry workman's compensation insurance for all of our staff, as is tuition reimbursement. It's not just health benefits, dental benefits, and salaries, but it all falls under the umbrella of salaries and benefits. And I always say, when you have to cut a budget, there's not enough crayons in the budget, okay? When you have to look at a budget critically, the only place you can really affect change is in this large category. Okay. This has sources of increase, but really, to be honest with you, the biggest source of increase this year is our is our contractual salaries. Now, historically, I don't think I've ever been up here when it hasn't also said health benefits, but because going into last year, we don't know what our health benefit increase is when we build the budget because we're in the state health benefit plan. So you're building it when you don't know what the premiums are going to be the following January. So there's a little bit of estimating, educated estimating done there. So last year's estimate wound up to be higher than what happened in reality. So the increase this year in the health benefits is not that high because last year's never came to fruition. We did budget an estimated 10.2% based on the advice of our broker. The state health benefit plan is extraordinarily difficult to predict. So this is probably the first year I haven't had health benefits up there. Okay, the tax levy summary. What does everyone want to know? That's great, you told us all about our programs. What does it cost, right? Okay, so you'll see there the numbers between the 18-19 and the 19-20 tax levy. The budget that's on the agenda for tonight's vote represents a 2.53% increase. Now, if you remember, we talked about that there's a 2% tax levy cap. The other 5.3 was the $211,000 that we showed from the banked cap from the 16-17 school year. That equates to $28.52 per 100,000 of assessed value. So one of the benchmarks that this district has always used is a homeowner of the average, a home of the average assessed value. Now that's a little bit of misleading because if I own a home and it's $500,000 and my neighbor builds $1 million house, well all of a sudden the average assessed home in Warren Township is $750,000. My house didn't just become $750,000. But this is just a benchmark that has been used historically here in Holland. So for the average assessed home, which is now $743,000 and change, this budget would increase their taxes over the course of a year of $208. Historically, the tax levy has two parts. You'll never know this when you look at your tax bill because it'll just have your school district tax, but there's really two parts of it, the general operating and then the debt service. And as we've discussed many times, the debt service in this district fell off in 15-16, and even with the referendum that was just passed, it will not come back into place. So for past couple of years, a few years ago, for those past years, there were two parts of the tax levy, and now there's only one part. It's only the general operating. So I hope you can see the tie-in between the part that Dr. Mingle did, which was much more interesting, and my part, which is in support of all that was previously